Good evening and welcome to Vigilant Broadcasting, the station of opportunity, presents The Author's Corner with your host, author Kimberly McLemore, as she welcomes her guests into the studio to discuss excerpts of their book.
All right, good evening and welcome to Vigilant Broadcasting Radio Station. I am your host, author Kimberly McLemore, and thank you for tuning in tonight to my show, The Author's Corner. Also, thank you for being patient. I know we're running a little bit behind this evening due to some technical difficulties, but I wanted to be able to share my amazing guest. I have one special amazing guest with me this evening, but before I jump into doing the interview, I would like to take a couple of minutes and tell you a little bit about myself and the purpose of this show. I am the author of How to Be a Success by Just Being You, memoir, Deception of the Heart, A Real Look into Domestic Violence, and, of course, my newest book, Are You Living or Existing? The Pros and Cons of Balancing Life. I am also the founder and CEO of the Women's Small Business Initiative, LLC, the host of the podcast Your Resource for Success on iHeartRadio and Spotify, the founder of Author Kimberly McLemore, LLC, co-owner of Talk Radio and TV Network, LLP, and owner, of course, Vigilant Broadcasting, and I am the host and owner of The Author's Corner. The purpose of this new show is to provide a platform for all of my new and existing authors, giving them opportunity to promote their books, talk about their events, and any other speaking engagements they have. And, of course, the biggest thing we want to know is where can we purchase that book. But let me introduce to you my very first special guest. She's wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to you all meeting her. And her name is Miss Katrina Vantassell. She is the author of The Weight, life coach, mentor, businesswoman, and founder of Patience Love Ministries, Inc. After experiencing hardships encountered as a single teenage parent, suffering the loss of a child to hit and run, dysfunctional marriages, much adversity, and ridicule, Katrina found her life to be in dire straits. Alcohol binges became a temporary source of comfort, but God used those storms to catapult her into the ministry that she was chosen to do. It was in the midst of those storms that her book, The Weight, was finally birthed. The Weight is a powerful story of hope and redemption. It is an inspirational message to many who may be experiencing or have experienced hidden abuse and brokenness in relationships. Katrina has a passion for reaching out to individuals who are broken and are in search of reclaiming their self-worth. Katrina is very active in the local community. She serves on the board of directors for women at the Well Broward, Inc. She is a volunteer and Cover Girls mentor for Miami Rescue Mission's Broward Outreach Centers. Katrina also volunteers as a reading pal and tutor mate for first graders through the school board of Broward County. So without further ado, let's all welcome my guest, Katrina. Hello, Katrina. How are you doing this evening?
Hello, Kimberly. I am wonderful, and you?
I am doing good. Thank you for asking. I am so excited about having you on the show. We have been trying to get you on the show for at least a year.
Yes. Yes,
so
it's
so
been
excited.
at least a year, yes.
And you've been very patient about it, and I just loved it because you were like, I think you have everything already. You are absolutely right. I got all your stuff because we've been waiting for such a long time. But why don't you just tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself and then what you have going on currently?
Well, as Kimberly mentioned, my name is Katrina Vantassell. I'm an author, life coach, and mentor, as well as a founder of Patience Love Ministries. It is a ministry that was birthed in the time that I was experiencing a lot of hardship. My story stems from single teenage parenthood, as you mentioned, to 2 dysfunctional marriages, losing a child to hit and run, and alcohol indeed became my temporary source of comfort. But God used those storms to catapult me into the ministry that He called me to do. And I often tell people that when God has a call on your life, rather than run from the call like I did, and then only to find yourself in the belly of a well like Jonah, and then when you get spit out of that well, you're right back to the starting point where God wanted you to be in the first place, my best advice is to just take heed to His instructions.
Amen.
Regardless of how difficult it may be, take heed to his instructions, because there are indeed consequences behind not listening to God. Mm-hmm. So I often tell people that I have a passion for reaching out to those who are in need. I have a passion to reach out to the broken, encouraging them and reminding them of their dignity in Christ that will elevate them and heal them no matter their circumstances. Those who have lost their self-worth, those who have lost their will to go on, and they may feel as if there's no hope. But I'm here to tell them, and I'm a living witness, that God will meet you right where you are, no matter your circumstances. He will turn your mess into a message, and he will definitely turn your test into a testimony.
Wow. Amen. You're absolutely right. And from all the things that you have gone through, I can't even fathom what it feels like to have to lose a child the way that you lost a child. And then, like you said, being a young teenage parent, that's, a big enough thing to have to deal with as a child yourself,
yes.
Raising a child. So, and we're going to backtrack just a little bit, because before we dive in the book, I want to know a little bit more about you. Now, I know that a lot of this the things that you're doing now all came out from the things that you've gone through. But talk to me and listeners a little bit more about you personally, about what you have done as far as, you've gone to school. What do you do besides writing your books? And I know you have a lot of programs and so forth. So let's talk a little bit about the business side of you, and then we'll go back into the book itself.
Yes. Outside of writing my book, I'm also a life coach. So what I do is I go into the homeless shelters. I not only mentor to the women, but there are times that I will do sessions, group sessions. I will do one-on-ones. I don't only do it inside the shelter. That's one of the main places that God has me at, is at the shelter, because a lot of those people are broken. They need somebody to take out time to pour into them. So I do go into the shelters. Outside of going into the shelters, I do small group sessions within my home right now. And I minister to the women and encourage them. I do different self-care and wellness exercises. I may do different assessments that sparks a conversation where they can open up and feel comfortable in that atmosphere to be able to talk about the situation that they're going through in a non-judgmental atmosphere. It also allows them the opportunity to, to vent their frustrations in an atmosphere that they may not otherwise be able to vent their frustrations in. And again, they're not judged, So outside of that, I also, as you mentioned, I'm on the board with a friend of mine who has Women at the Well Broward. It's a prison ministry. What we do is we support the women that are incarcerated in prison. If they need clothes or anything like that, we will provide those clothes for them. Most of the time, I do a lot of clothing drives so that I can provide those clothing. We also assist the women transitioning out of prison that may have difficulty in finding a job, or they may need clothing to present themselves in a professional manner when they go on a job interview. So we assist them in that area as well. And also the teens of the parents that are incarcerated. We have programs for them as well, pretty much preparing them for college, taking them on college tours and things of that sort that I do with that particular ministry. I also collect food, clothing, and shoes as well for the children that is in the shelters. Mm-hmm. And then outside of that, yes, I do have a business aspect, because I have an online business, which is Mahogany Chic Boutique, which is Afrocentric clothing. So I do that as well. And aside from that, I'm also a paralegal. I don't talk about it as much, but I do have, people that I assist on the side that may come to me for different things that are within my means to be able to do and assist them without going to an attorney. But what I do, because it's a part of my ministry, and I know it can be expensive, such as if a person needs to set up an LLC or a 501c3 organization, or things like that. Or I have some parents that come to me, they may be going through a divorce, or they may need assistance with filing child support papers. Things like that is within my means to do. If, in fact, they cannot afford to go to an attorney. So rather than me charging, I do it as a ministry because I've been in that situation before where I've needed certain things done and could not afford it because I had 6 children, and so I know how it feels to need something and not have.
Right.
And it's not a good feeling when you need and then you don't have like a strong support system to provide.
Absolutely.
So everything that I do outside of my Afrocentric business that I have online, everything else that I do it more so as a ministry. Most life coaches, we all know it does cost a fee, but for whatever reason that I will not question God on, He has me doing life coaching as a ministry. So if a person wants to sow into that ministry, then that's fine. But, it's not something that I charge for. It's not what God wants me to do. So, again, I do life coaching, not in the local community as well, in the shelter as well, and the various organizations. So that is what I do outside of writing the book.
Well, I tell you what, you are a busy woman, and a thing I love about you is you are very well-rounded, and you're taking the aspects of your personal and professional life, and like you said, you're giving that as a part of your ministry to help others continue to soar and know their worth, and, I mean, that's a blessing all on its own, so I congratulate you on that, and I just think that's amazing.
Yes, thank you very much. And I forgot to mention one more thing. I am back in college.
Oh my goodness! What are you taking in college?
I am studying interdisciplinary studies. It's where I can cross disciplines in human services because it's what I do already in the community with missions, ministry work, as well as social work on my job. So in addition to human services, I'm also studying the missions component and the ministry component. Wow. So, and that's the beauty about that particular degree because in interdisciplinary studies, you get to customize the things that you like to do. So outside of working full-time, yes, I'm back in college after 30 years, and, I have my businesses, and I make time for ministry. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, like you said, you're doing exactly God's plan. He laid it out for you, and even though you've had some very tragic moments in your life, you have taken everything and you have ran with it. You didn't walk, you ran. So, I mean, you're running full speed ahead, and like I said, you're doing things that are expected and may not be what other people expect you to do, but you are doing with the expectations of what God has planned for you. So I think that's beautiful,
absolutely.
And I really, like I said, I just sitting up here listening, I'm like, wow, I thought I did a lot of things, but I think you got me outbeat on this one. So I commend you for that. And so let me just say real quick, for those who are just chiming in, I'm telling you, you are missing a good one here. Miss Katrina Vantassell is an amazing woman. We haven't even dived into the book yet, and we're going to do that shortly, but I really wanted people to hear her story. We all have a backstory, and that's what makes us who we are today. And this woman has definitely poured herself into everything that she has accomplished into others so that they can see and hear their worth. So, but before we actually dive into the book, what I would like to do is just take a quick commercial break, and so that we can talk a little bit, and when we come back, we're going to actually really talk and dive into the book, because you're going to read some excerpts for the book, and then we're going to talk about why you chose those excerpts. So let's just go right into the commercial break for the next couple of minutes. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Author's Corner with your host, author Kimberly McLemore.
All right. Good evening again, and welcome back to the Author's Corner again. I am the host, author Kimberly McLemore. Let's jump right back into Miss Katrina. We're going to talk now about her book called The Wait. The one thing I want to find out is, how did you come up with this title? Because that title, it's simple, but obviously we can think about a million other things of what that purpose of then the name of The Wait means. How did you come up with that, Katrina?
Well, the title of The Wait actually was inspired by God. It's the title that he gave me because, again, I was on a path where I didn't want to wait on God. I wanted to do things my own way. And because I did not wait on him, I made a mess of things. And it came to a point where he had to step in and force me to wait. It's not something I wanted to do on my own, but he made me wait on him. If I wanted to live a life according to his good and perfect will, if I wanted him to orchestrate my steps and pull me up out of the mess that I was in, and indeed I was in some deep stuff, far from God, I had to wait on him to orchestrate the master plan, to lay out the promises that he has for me. That's one side of it. There's another side of the waiting that I won't dig into because that part will be revealed when they read the book. But however, the first part is because God had to step in. He had to humble me because I was like on a high-speed chase at one point, trying to get away from him. I didn't want to wait on him. I wanted to do things my own way. I wanted to give a Sarah's response, but guess what? Sarah's response, there were consequences behind that.
Absolutely.
So, yes, it was inspired by God. It's specifically what he had me to name the book because I had a hard time. Like, Lord, what am I going to title this book? And the main thing he said was The Wait because I had a problem with waiting.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that is why it is entitled The Wait.
Yeah, and I like that, and I like what you just said. I mean, you were trying to do it your way. And as we all know, when we try to do things our way, things will never really work out the way that they should be. And like you said, he humbled you, and that's the important part of it. And so your continuation of who you are is exactly what he inspired you to be. Like I said, even though you've had some tragedies in between that, some of those tragedies were brought onto yourself because, like you said, you weren't going to live that life that he wanted you to live, and you wanted to get out of the way. You wanted to just do what you needed to do so you wouldn't have to feel that pain. But talk now. Let's jump into the book. I know that you're excited, and I'm really looking forward to hear you reading some of the excerpts of your book. And then once you read that, then we'll go ahead and have some more conversation.
Okay. The chapter, it is from chapter 6. It's entitled Trapped in a Cocoon. So I'm going to read 2 paragraphs from that. In hopes that through much prayer, things would change for the better once married, we went to the courthouse to apply for our marriage license. Again, my gut feelings kept saying no, but I just dismissed them. Within a week's time, we had a private ceremony in the church sanctuary, just us, the pastor, and some very close friends of ours. We did not tell a soul that we had gotten married, not so much as even a discussion with the children. And when we finally mentioned it to our families, they were not pleased. I was told by one of his relatives that I made a mistake, that I just didn't know what I had gotten myself into by marrying him, that they loved him, but he was a mess, and I would soon see for myself. My heart began to sink. That gut feeling came back to me almost nerve-wracking. One part of me wanted to believe what I had just heard, but the other part was saying that it was just a false comment from a jealous in-law. A few months into the marriage, instead of things getting better, things began to spiral downward. There was some truth to that statement. The emotional and verbal abuse intensified. The kids were treated as if they were in military boot camp. And when I tried to address the issue, he accused me of taking sides with them. his behavior was explosive. It is one thing to discipline children out of love and explain the reason for chastisement. It is another thing to talk harshly to them and kill their morale. I felt as if my motherhood were being stripped from me. Every decision I attempted to make concerning the kids got shot down. I found myself on my knees many nights for years crying out to God, pleading for him to intervene, to touch his heart and open his eyes to see his harsh ways, to mold him and shape him into a God-fearing man, to be a godly leader of his home. I sacrificed much to try to make my marriage work, even becoming a teen parent when he began to coach Little League football for the team that the boys played on. Since he decided to coach, I felt that it was the right thing to do and work together as a team. And maybe football will be our saving grace. Outside that, we barely did anything as a family. So I seized the opportunity.
Wow. Deep. The thing that it really stood out to me the most is that you had a family member of his tell you that he was the wrong person for you.
Yes.
That was important. You said your stomach just dropped down, basically bottom to the floor. What else were you thinking at that moment?
I was like, oh, Lord, what am I getting myself into? His family member has told me that I'm making a mistake and that I will soon find out. I was kind of speechless at that moment because at first I was like, okay, well, maybe they're just saying this because they're jealous in-laws and they don't want to see our relationship work. That's what I was hoping. I was hoping that it was a jealous in-law thing, but what I realized is that later on, after a while, I started to realize that, no, what they were saying was actually true. And by the time, I won't say by the time I realized it, because I had a feeling, because I had this gut feeling prior to, even months before even making a decision to marry. I had this gut feeling that he wasn't the right person. But at that particular time, the church that I was going to, the pastor, of course, preaches on, coming up out of sin. And rightfully so, they should, preach on coming up out of sin, fornication, and things of that sort. But what happened was I was recently divorced from my kid's father. I was still grieving the loss of my daughter to a hit and run, amongst some other things. So at that particular time of my grieving, it's when he stepped in. I will say Dex because that's his name in the book. At my time of grieving is when he stepped in. In other words, he took advantage of my weakness when I was at my most vulnerable point. And at that particular time, I didn't have the energy to fight it off.
Right. Because
I was grieving. Everything was so fresh. And then other things that were going on when people read the book that leads up to this chapter, they will see. But it was just so much going on that I didn't have the energy to fight it off. And then so I find myself in another situation, with him. And then, the pastor preached come up out of sin. And so he was like, well, we should get married. He kept saying all these different things. I kept trying to fight it off. And then I was like, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, if we get married, maybe there would be a change, because the excuse was he was dealing with baby mama drama at the time. That was his excuse for acting a certain type of way with us. But I realized that wasn't, baby mama drama had nothing to do with that, And so I was like, oh, my Lord, what do? I got myself in this situation. We moved. He moved in with me. And, again, at that time, I just didn't have the strength to fight it because of, what I was grieving, with my daughter. So he moved in with me, and I'm feeling guilty.
Right.
And, in church. I'm feeling guilty. I don't know about other people when they live in a certain type of way, but I know I was feeling guilty. And the message was convicting. And so I was like, well, what do I do? Do I go ahead and get married? Should I come up out of this? I was like in a catch-22 because, again, as I've often said, is that I was grieving. So
right.
I eventually got, yes, I eventually,
go ahead.
I can hear you.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying that I eventually just fell into Satan's trap, as I would say, because what I realized is that before God sends the promise, Satan will always send a counterfeit.
Amen. Exactly.
And
so what I was going to say, and the other thing that stuck out to me when you were reading the book was that you talked about in the beginning of that paragraph how you got married and you never told a soul. So like you said, beyond that point, once you got to the point, you were already feeling guilty. You were already knowing that this is not the right thing to do, because when you feel you have to hide something so beautiful and precious as a marriage, that right there was definitely ringing some bells. And then, of course, as the family found out and as you started to learn, you definitely knew you were in the wrong environment. And, I can understand that your reasoning of not being able to heal in that person you felt was, hey, they're here, they're helping me, they listen, they're making me feel better. But at the same token, all of this is not right. So it's amazing how I think I find a lot of women, it's just a part of our nature to be nurturers and to always say, but this, or but that, even when we know the situation is wrong. And so I like how you have put that into the book and making people realize that, this is not the path. This is not the right path. So when you did understand that, okay, I'm completely in wrong for this is not the person I need to be with, what was your next step and how did you handle that piece? Because you talk about in your bio about how you've been in dysfunctional marriages. How long did you stay in that dysfunctional marriage?
It was, the marriage itself was 11 years. With him, 14 years.
Wow.
And yes, my reasoning, and I know it is not an excuse, but it's the excuse that I use, is that my first marriage didn't work with my children, Dad. We were young and we had our issues, but that's also in the book as well. But I didn't want to have to, keep jumping in and out of relationships, because when I get in a relationship, I'm in for the long haul. I'm not in this, dating this day, not together the next day or one night stands or anything like that. And my kids were small, so I wanted to try to have them raised up in a home with, although he wasn't the biological parent, I wanted to give them that family feeling. But what I realized is that it was doing more damage than good by staying in an unhealthy situation, because he was verbally abusive. And I will tell anybody, verbal, emotional, mental abuse is a monster. It's worse than a person hitting on you. And a lot of times we as parents, we stay in these unhealthy relationships, and then we subject our children to things that will cause them to veer off on a different path. And then when the children begin to rebel, we wonder why they're acting a certain type of way, not realizing that they have seen what we've gone through from a young age. And I thought I was hiding it from my children, but obviously they noticed it. But what happened is that it had gotten to a point to my sons when they became teenagers. They were like, Mom, why are you letting him continue to treat you this way? And they were like, Mom, I swear, if he do certain things to you or put his hand on you, we're going to retaliate. And the way they were responding, the things that they were saying. And it wasn't only upsetting my children, it was upsetting my family because my family saw it. My ex was the type, he was explosive. He didn't care who see him. He didn't try to wait and handle things behind closed doors. Things were done in the open. It got so bad until domestic abuse started happening with conflicts between him and the children. And at that point, when my children came to me and they were like, Mama, we're tired of this, that we're going to, take initiative if he keeps doing you a certain type of way, that was the eye-opener for me, because a lot of parents, and men go through abuse too. It's not just women that may not talk about it as much, but men get mistreated and they go through abuse too, So when my kids mentioned that, I had to realize, wait a minute. I had to reassess the situation. I had to figure out a way to come up out of this situation. The path I chose at the particular time may not have necessarily been the right way, but I had to figure out a way to come up out of this situation, because what I saw is somebody was going to get hurt. And what I realized is that a lot of either the parent, the husband or wife, or girlfriend or boyfriend, or the children, somebody wind up getting hurt. Why? Because the mom or the dad choose to stay in a domestic violence situation. And then oftentimes the children have to jump in to try to defend mom or dad, or the woman has to defend herself against her spouse or significant other, or vice versa. The man has to defend himself. And then somebody eventually get hurt. Why? Because you allowed it to go on too long. So rather than subject my children to getting cased up in jail or getting hurt, I had to see myself out of the situation, because had I stayed in that situation and subjected myself continuously to domestic, emotional, and mental abuse, and not only subjecting myself to it, but subjecting the children to it, it would not have been a good situation. And a lot of us parents, we stick it out regardless if the man beat us to sleep, or if the woman, beat the man to sleep, or not necessarily beat the man to sleep, but, women, sometimes we have a filter on us, some of us, and, we tend to sometimes use that to our advantage, because why? They're a man. So if the police get involved, 9 times out of 10, they're going to go side with the woman, and then the man gets cased up, when in actuality, he may be the victim. So it worked both ways, but what I realized is that I subjected my children to certain situations that they would have otherwise not gotten caught up in. You know what I mean? Because I allow certain things to happen. I know I raised my children the right way. Right. But it got to a point they didn't want to be around me anymore. And it's not because they didn't want to be around me. It's because they were seeing what was going on in the atmosphere. It was affecting them. They didn't want to be around him. Right. But I felt that they didn't want to be around me. So I'm trying to assess myself, figure out what I'm doing. And it's not what I was doing. It's what I wasn't doing. Is protecting them from domestic abuse. Right. And that's the key word that you said. Like I said, it wasn't what you were, it's the things you weren't doing. And that's the key, that we think a lot of times that our children aren't resilient. They are much more resilient than we give them credit for. And they see things that, like you said, that they should not have to see or deal with, but they can handle it, and they knew that you did not deserve it, and they certainly did not deserve it. So I'm actually glad that even though you knew what was really going on, you knew you had to get out of the situation, that your kids made you much more aware of saying, hey, Mom, you don't deserve this. It's time to let this go. It's time for you to move on. But before we continue the conversation, we do have a caller that is listening in. I wanted to find out, the caller who is listening in, if you have any questions for Ms. Katrina, please, chime on in, and she'll be more than happy to answer your question this evening. Caller, if you do have a question, please go ahead and chime in.
All right. So if the caller decides that they would like to talk to us, they're more than welcome to do that, and I will find that out in a few minutes. But we'll continue on with our conversation here. And before we wrap things up, though, I want to ask you a few more questions. Katrina, like I said, your book is phenomenal, and I love the title of it. And the story, as tragic as it may be, there's always, here's the happy ending. The happy ending is that you are here and that you have been blessed to live to talk about this. And believe me, I understand exactly everything you were talking about. I am I was in a domestic abuse situation as well some years ago, and I am considered a survivor and have written my book, as I talked about earlier on the memoir. So I understand what you're saying, how we believe as victims, the abuser, we're to some degree we still constantly protect them in the process because we think that we're doing our families a favor. And as you have learned that was not the right thing to do, and you're here to be able to talk about it and you help others understand that that they need to know their worth and that they need to know more and be better for themselves, because this is where God is leading them to. But what I want to talk a little bit more about is that I would like to find out what programs you may have coming up, any speaking engagements you may want to share, or any other information about the book that you would like to share.
Well, I am currently being promoted on Gospel Grind radio station. If you go to gospelgrind.com, you will, in the authors section, you will see my book listed there. They actually reached out to me last week because they wanted to, in fact, promote. So I do have an interview coming up soon with them. I haven't set the date as of yet, but it will be soon. They also want me to give some encouraging words to the listeners when that interview does take place. I will also be doing some sessions probably within the month at the Broward Homeless Shelter as well. And later on this year, at the National Black Book Festival out of Texas, I think it's Fallbrook Church. I believe it's a mega church, and I'm not sure if it's in Texas. I'm not sure if it's Austin, Texas, but it's one of them. But I will be at the National Black Book Festival in October. And my book I'm listed on the website. My picture is listed. My book is listed. And then it also takes you directly to the website there. So I'll be there as well, speaking on my book, speaking to people in the book club, and also doing book signings as well. And within the next couple of months, I plan on doing a book lunch pertaining to my book to invite some people out.
Okay.
And have a book signing.
And it sounds like you got a lot of busy things going on, and that is great. And, again, I just want to say real quick to our listener who's on or have a caller, if you still have any other questions, you have time to ask Ms. Katrina questions about her book or either about her business. And so if you do have a question, just take yourself off of mute so that you can talk to us. Or if you have a question for me, you're more than welcome to ask me questions. But as we will continue to move forward with this, we have a few more minutes before the show will come to an end. So, Katrina, like I say, you have accomplished a lot of great things through all that you have been through, and I love the programs. I love your ministry, and obviously you got some other things going on here in the near future. But to also tell our listeners how they can get a hold of you and reach out to you, and obviously get a copy of your book.
Okay. Well, they can get a copy of my book on Amazon. It's also on Barnes & Nobles and Books A Million. It's listed under Katrina Vantassell. That is Katrina with the K. Vantassell is Vantassell. They'll be able to purchase the book there. If they want a signed copy of the book, they could go to my website at www.trinavantassell.com, and they can contact me through there to let me know that they want to purchase a book, and I will get a book out to them. If they want to email me, they can either do it through the website, or they can email me at trinavantassell@gmail.com. I can also be reached on my office line at 954-637-6885. 3712.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Katrina,
You're welcome.
has such a pleasure having you on this evening. Do you have any last words for our listeners?
Yes, I have some last words. What I would love to say to everyone, it is extremely important that you keep God the center focus of your relationship, because truly there are consequences behind leaving him out of the equation. And for those that are broken, I want them to know that there is still hope. Again, as I've mentioned earlier, God will meet you right where you are, no matter your circumstances. My suggestion to you, or words of encouragement to you, is to know your worth and own your worth. Let no one strip you of your dignity. Know who you are and whose you are, because what the naysayers think is a non-factor. So know your worth, own your worth, and keep God the center focus of your life.
Amen. Amen. That was amazing. Oh, again, Katrina, it has been such a pleasure having you on the show this evening with me. I appreciate you so much, and looking forward to hopefully meet you in the near future and continue to do great work that you are doing.
Thank you. It's
You're
a pleasure
welcome.
being on this show.
Thank you. All right. And again, to my listeners, you just heard from author Katrina Vantassell. She is the author of The Wait. She also has some phenomenal businesses that she has available. So if you are looking for any help, she is a life coach, she's a mentor, and she's a founder of Patients Love Ministries, Inc. She has got a lot going on throughout her community, through Broward Outreach Centers. So, please take the time to reach out if you do need help. Like I said, her mission is more than just talking about her book. Her mission is to help those who are in need on every level. So, again, I do thank Katrina for coming on this evening. And what I want to continue to talk about before we end our show this evening is that if you are interested in being a sponsor or a guest on the Author's Corner, all you need to do is send me a short bio, a book cover, and a professional picture of yourself to KimberlyMMclemore@gmail.com. I also want to bring up the fact that I do have a new ebook release, which is Are You Living or Existing? The Pros and Cons of Balancing Life. It's up for sale for $3.99 on Amazon. So please help me get to bestseller. And by getting that bestseller, go ahead and get the new ebook. You can download it immediately. It is a phenomenal book that talks about self-assessment and learning how to stop looking through the lens of others and live your life to the fullest. So please go ahead and get that book. It's a new ebook release on Amazon for $3.99. It will be on sale for at least another 30 days, so I would love to have your support for that. Also, if you have any questions for me, you can follow me, and if you want to learn more about who I am, as I talked earlier, you can follow me on social media platforms at Kimberly M. McLemore through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or you can also find me through the Women's Small Business Initiative, and you can also look at my YouTube channel as well. Through Women's Small Business Initiative. Again, I will say thank you for tuning in tonight to Vigilant Broadcasting. Please stop by and like our Talk Radio and TV Network, LLP, all of our social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. But until next time, join me for next month for another amazing show with another amazing guest. Have a good evening, and thank you.
Good night, everyone, and thank you for tuning in tonight. We'll be back next month on Friday evening at 7 p.m. EST with 2 more amazing guests. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Periscope at author Kimberly McLemore and at Talk Radio TV Network, LLP.